Upon its release, 2016 game OneShot quickly became one of the highest rated and most successful RPG Maker games ever. But not everyone knows that it's actually a remake of its previous 2014 version that is still available on the internet for free. In this video I will go over what in the remake has been improved and what I think has been lost. If you haven't played the game yet, you might want to start with 2016 version. OneShot is very well liked by the community and the story is one of its main appeals, so do not ruin your first playthrough experience. I will link the Steam page of the game in the description. First, let's talk about the technical part. Original free version was made in RPG Maker 2003, while the remake was done using a newer program, RPG Maker XP. This allowed several big improvements in the interface. For example, freeware has the standard RPG Maker 2003 menu that displays irrelevant character stats. The notes section accumulates a bunch of game tips and rules you acquire throughout the game. They seem a bit more chaotic compared to the neatly organized notes in the remake. Items are mostly the same, except in the original game you have to manually equip some of them. I thought it was a nice touch to use the equipment section to put on certain clothes that help you advance in the game, instead of something that boosts your stats in combat. For example, you can equip boots that will make you walk faster by default. Also, fast traveling is separated from the menu interface. Overall, cleaner in-game menu, separate quick access item menu and addition of settings tab in 2016 version are all great improvements to the UI. Text, font and color have been changed in the remake. The sound of letters appearing has been added as well. Some item icons have been changed. Some character chat icons, environment and character sprites have been added or updated. Most notably, Silver's character model and chat icons have been updated. Robot's character model has been updated to fit the icon more. Lynx, Shepard's and Magpie's chat icons have been added, and Magpie's, Lynx and Robot Guardian's character models have been updated as well. Gameplay, while mostly similar, is more fast-paced and straightforward in the free version, but that's not necessarily a good thing. It's because the maps are smaller and have less extra areas in them, and some items and objects were placed more random and in your face. Some items you find in the Barrens, for example, are outside and on the ground. It feels a little bit too direct. Most notable map changes in 2016 version are an expanded dormitories area and an addition of mineshaft section in the Barrens. In the Glen, research facility and Calamus and Dalula house have been added. Original version of the refuge only has the sky section with the office and apartments areas absent. No lamplighter or elevator either. Instead of apartments, there's a smaller version of the library. So there are only 3 major areas. Some cutscenes and soundtracks have been added in the remake as well. Now let's talk about the atmosphere, since it directly correlates with the visuals and the game map size. While both of the game's versions give off the feeling of gloomy, decaying world, the map expansion in the remake really helps you to feel like there's a lot to explore about the in-game world on your first playthrough. Robots walking around and presence of energy generating facilities, some characters, buildings and objects being bigger, more appropriate sizes. The item placements in the remake feel more natural and coherent. All of that helps to strengthen the feeling like there's an actual in-game world with its society and infrastructure. But obviously the discussion about atmosphere would be incomplete without any mentions of game's writing. The world building has expanded by a lot in the remake. Besides all of the information that you obtain in areas that are absent in the freeware, you also learn more new things about the world through dialogue with NPCs like robots, through new notes in the Barrens, and through new object interactions. And of course, dialogues between Niko and all the major characters have gotten way more developed. While in the original version, Silver, Alula and Calamus seemed more like side characters that just briefly help you before you can advance towards your destination. In the remake you get to know each of them way better and can more thoroughly understand each of their different personalities. The addition of 4th major area with Lamplighter, Kip and everyone and everything else in it helps to develop the feeling of decay of OneShot world, as the supposedly place where people move to from the unsafe areas is struggling to keep away the squares and maintaining the illumination. By the end of the remake, you feel way more informed about the in-game world, way more connected to the characters, and way more invested in their future than in freeware. The 3rd major area in the original game, even though called the refuge on the map, seemed more like a transitional area before the tower, or the spire as what it's called there. Almost nothing about that place was explained. The tasks that you needed to do before entering the tower were very quick and straightforward. Overall, the area felt a little rushed and less consistent compared to the previous parts of the in-game world. In both versions of the game you get the journal translated. However, while in the remake you at least get some information about the author, someone who seems to know a lot about the world. In the freeware, the author wasn't mentioned at all, so the delivering of the translated text of someone completely unfamiliar that talks about the entity felt a little out of place. The ending sequences are quite different in each version. In the original game, after you learn the information from the journal, Entity traps Niko in a crossroad maze. You can solve it by equipping different items that will glow when Niko gets close to the right direction. After finding your way out, you arrive back at the house where Niko first woke up, which is apparently located in the refuge. Niko goes to bed and gets teleported in the room with an elevator, which arrives at the top of the tower after the last messages from the entity. Obviously, the remake ending sequence is more sophisticated, with more puzzles that go beyond a single application, more lore and explanation from the author, more persuasion from the entity, and one of my favorite soundtracks from the game. The more interesting part for me, however, is how different I felt being put in front of the same set of choices by the end of each game. Since in the freeware the dialogues with major characters are much shorter and I didn't get to know as much about the OneShot world and its inhabitants, and the maze sequence at the end seems to imply that the entity can manipulate the in-game areas. While it's still ambiguous what happens to Niko if I decide to place the sun at the top of the tower, I started to feel way more questionable about the in-game reality. In the remake though, Niko basically becomes another citizen of the in-game world after exploring it and interacting with all the characters. The point I'm trying to make here is that by the end of the original game, it feels more like choosing whether you think the in-game world that Niko has been put in is real or not. You question yourself whether or not the entity is trying to trick you into destroying an actual small in-game world, or you're just being put through some sort of test to bring Niko back home from some sort of simulation. While in the remake, even though all of those thoughts still occur, they are being greatly diminished by the deep connections that you build with other characters and the general feeling of being invested in the world's outcome. So the final decision of the game really becomes a question whether or not you are ready to leave the main character in this new in-game world and give all Niko's new acquaintances a chance at restoring it for the price of Niko never coming back home. Niko's fate after the return of the sun still remains unclear, but just intuitively it feels like nothing bad is going to happen except the inability to travel back home. That's how in my opinion 2016 version alters the perspective on the final decision in the game. It's not necessary that one ending is better than the other. It just feels like you consider different things when approaching each of them. Obviously, I do not include the events that happened in the Solstice DLC when comparing the games. The stories would be way different at that point. People have varying opinions on the Solstice storyline. Some say it lessens the importance of the decision at the end of the base game, others argue that the development of the story was worth it. Well, after all of that said, there's still a question left. Has the remake version actually lost anything in comparison with the original? I would argue yes, and that would be very unique game mechanics that are present in 2014 version. If you didn't know, the name OneShot was originally meant to represent the way you're supposed to go through the game, and that is without quitting it. You only had one shot at completing it. The entity warning in the remake, even though still present, essentially lost its meaning. Now, could you really not leave the game at all without losing progress? Well, no. You still had bets placed throughout the in-game world that allowed you to quit the game without consequences, one per each major area, just like in the remake, except the placements were slightly different. And what would have happened if you quit the game without using the bed? Well, the next time you'd open the application, the menu background would be changed to the one with shattered light bulb accompanied by scary music. And if you decide to start the game, you'd see the empty dark bedroom with even scarier music playing in the background. But upon restarting the application after that, you get to play from the beginning again, except now you'd get a brief message of Niko feeling deja vu. I don't know if it's a problem with my computer or not, but the bad ending only triggered if the app was closed by pressing X in the top right corner. Quitting the game through menu and starting the application again would just skip the bad ending but show the deja vu message. After completing the game by picking either out of two choices that you get at the top of the tower, the game locks you out from replaying it again. The only way to reset the game is through file manipulation, that I don't even know if was intended or not, because I couldn't find any in-game hints for that. And you might have a fair question, Does it matter if these game application mechanics are present in the game or not? Well, while maybe not implemented perfectly, the imposure of strict rules on game application user and permanent consequences for the final decision you make, insofar as not allowing you to replay the game at all to see what could have happened if you picked the other option, felt very refreshing in the original game. Not to dismiss all the cool and unique additional game features that were added in the remake, but the boldness and unconventionality of these one-shot game mechanics, maybe not directly, but might have helped players to realize that the different ways you can engage with the app itself and permanent in-game consequences might augment the game experience, might help to broaden the gameplay within or outside the executable like in 2016 version, or might enhance the development of the plot, the themes and the concepts of the game. But was the exclusion of these experimental game mechanics justified in the paid version? I would say yes. The developers have done an amazing job at improving game's aspects in the remake, not to mention all the additional content along with the DLC the game has received. Keeping such harsh game rules that only appeal to a small part of the player base would probably measurably worsen game's reception and marketability. And that's going to be it for my analysis. Thank you for watching the video. Leave a comment if you agree or disagree with something I've said about either versions of the game. Maybe share some of your thoughts on the differences between them. Leave a like if you think the video was good. And subscribe and click the bell to get notified about my next video. See ya!